Hello everyone and welcome to my presentation on the relations between the BRICS Plus and the European Union. So, a few words about me before I start. My name is Lucas and I'm an exchange student from Germany and I study political science and economics. I chose this topic because the relationship between major global organizations like the BRICS Plus and the EU is increasingly important, yet often overlooked in mainstream discussions. After looking into both organizations, I became interested in how they interact and shape each other's influence. The recent expansion of BRICS has given the organization more economic and political power, making its connection with Europe particularly significant. Exploring this relationship helps us to understand broader trends in global politics and economics. The question I want to look at in this presentation is BRICS Plus and the EU global partners or power rivals. Let's first compare the two organizations to understand their differences and global roles. On the left, we have the European Union, which consists of 27 member states. It is a highly integrated organization with supranational institutions and a legal framework based on shared values. The European Union has a single market and a single currency, the euro, and its member countries are geographically concentrated in one region. Despite challenges like an aging population, which makes up about 5.7% of the world population, the EU accounts for 17% of global GDP, though its growth is slower compared to BRICS Plus. It is also worth noting that the EU institutions have clearly stated that the EU and BRICS memberships are mutually exclusive, highlighting the different nature of these two organizations. On the right, we have BRICS Plus, a group of 11 countries: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, the United Arab Emirates, Ethiopia, Indonesia, and Iran. BRICS operates on a looser intergovernmental cooperation model, focusing on the common interests of emerging economies. Unlike the EU, it lacks a single market or currency, and its members are geographically dispersed across the world. BRICS represents 54.6% of the world's population and accounts for 42% of global GDP, showing faster growth than the EU. This comparison highlights the contrast between the EU's strong integration and shared values and BRICS' flexible coalition of emerging economies, which is expanding its influence globally. Let's now look at the political relations between the EU and BRICS Plus. The EU does not have formal relations with BRICS Plus as a group. Instead, it works through bilateral and interregional agreements with individual countries. Because of this, relations vary. Partnerships with Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE are strategic, while agreements with Russia and China have lost political relevance. Relations with Ethiopia continue under frameworks like the Cotonou Agreement, but the EU has raised strong concerns about human rights. With Iran, the political relationship is shaped mainly by the Iran nuclear deal, which the EU has tried to preserve despite difficulties. At the same time, the geopolitical unity of BRICS Plus is weak. Members have very different positions towards the EU and the United States. The recent enlargement increased the group's geopolitical distance from Europe, especially because of the inclusion of Iran and other countries that are generally far from EU's political alignment. As a result, BRICS Plus enlargement has created even more distance between the EU and the BRICS Plus group. Now, let's look at the economic relations between the EU and BRICS Plus. The EU has no free trade agreement or investment agreement with BRICS Plus as a group, but there are a few exceptions. Egypt, Brazil through Mercosur, and South Africa through the SADC agreement have agreements with the EU. With other countries, negotiations are ongoing, suspended, or not in place at all. In terms of trade, the original BRICS countries account for about 25% of total EU trade, while the new members contribute only around 3%. Overall, EU BRICS Plus trade has still grown strongly, From 2012 to 2022, it increased by 35%, reaching about 1.6 billion euros. There has also been a clear increase in traded services, with the value almost doubling over the last decade. When we look at foreign direct investments, BRICS Plus remains a marginal source in global outward FDI, but outward investment from BRICS countries has grown quickly, 235% increase between 2011 and 2021, but it is still far below the EU. The EU remains the largest global source of outward FDI, reflecting its strong economic presence worldwide. To understand how both organizations shape global governance, it is useful to compare their roles in key multilateral organizations. At the UN, BRICS Plus coordination has strengthened. They were unified on the Gaza ceasefire resolution, while showing mixed positions on Ukraine. In contrast, EU member states were more divided about the Gaza ceasefire resolution. In the WTO, BRICS Plus countries often cooperate to defend the interests of developing economies, especially in agricultural negotiations. This sometimes creates tensions with the EU, but both sides agree on the need for WTO reform, particularly to restore the dispute settlement system. In global finance, because BRICS Plus countries have less voting power in institutions like the World Bank, they have created the new development bank and the contingent reserve arrangement and increasingly promote de-dollarization through more local currency trade. In infrastructure and investment, members of both organizations are involved in global initiatives. For example, China's Belt and Road initiatives, EU's Global Gateway, and the India Middle East East Europe Economic Corridor. BRICS Plus influence is rising, though the EU remains institutionally stronger in multilateral organizations. To conclude, the EU and BRICS Plus differ fundamentally in structure and integration. The EU is highly supranational with strong institutions, while BRICS Plus is a loose intergovernmental group. Political and economic relations between the EU and BRICS Plus are mainly bilateral, without engagement at the group level. The EU maintains stronger institutional power globally, but BRICS Plus influence is growing, especially after its recent enlargement. In multilateral organizations, BRICS Plus is increasingly active and sometimes coordinated, while the EU sometimes also has divisions among its member states. Economically, the EU continues to lead foreign direct investment in global trade rules, while BRICS Plus is expanding in trade, services, and infrastructure initiatives. Overall, the enlargement of BRICS Plus has increased geopolitical distance from the EU, highlighting the complexity of their relationship, cooperative in some areas, competitive in others. These are the references I use for this presentation. Thank you all for listening and for your attention. I hope this presentation gave you a clear overview of the relations between the EU and BRICS Plus and highlighted both the opportunities and challenges in their political, economic, and multilateral interactions.